Greetings from Datagaps. In this short overview, we would like to showcase how Datagaps DataOps Suite can provide a solution that's not only comprehensive, but also a great return on investment and overall boost to quality of your data pipelines. Firstly, a quick refresher on why data quality matters. Multiple studies have shown how data quality directly impacts more than 26% of a firm's revenue. This isn't a shocking number when considering that most data incidents take about 9 hours to resolve, which inherently takes up about 40% of a data engineer's workday. With 10 years of experience in the field across multiple sectors, including banking, healthcare, logistics, and education, we at Datagaps have solved these problem statements numerous times. We have multiple success stories under our belt for data quality monitoring, migration validation, transformation validation, and of course, BI validation. A common quote for our success story is post-implementation of Datagaps automated solutions, our clients' data engineers are free to focus on the actual problem statements as opposed to the data quality issues and restarting pipelines. Now that we have set the stage, we can define the points of the pipeline where data validation and governance are crucial. We will use the standard ETL pipeline as reference for the base architecture. This includes ingestion of data from various vendors and sources in different formats, collecting this data into a landing zone before curating it and preparing it with transformation tools, pushing the datasets into a production warehouse before segregating the datasets into data marts, and finally, the views and tables from production are used in BI tools and analytics for creation of reports and of course driving business decisions. With multiple layers, schemas, and databases in sequence alongside transformations and migrations to push the datasets from a raw state to a finally fully processed view, we have identified 6 major chunks where validation is paramount. We start with validation at ingestion. While the application has the capability to connect with the vendor directly to validate and score the data in terms of quality before it's even pulled into the system, this function can be performed at any state. Volume checks, null checks, domain checks, parent-child relationships, foreign key checks, duplicity checks, and many more user-defined rules with a zero-code deployment system and parameterized and exportable templates for easy management can be deployed and maintained to the suite easily. We apply shift-left philosophy to ensure we catch errors or discrepancies as early as possible, as rectifying these requires the least amount of resources and time. Secondly, we perform migration validation. A side note, we have a complete set of automation tools for validation of cloud or on-prem migration systems. A success story of ours involves on-prem SQL Server being migrated to the cloud version of Snowflake, where Datagaps automation system helped the client with the validation of datasets, transformation and its logic, as well as BI reporting. In the current example, however, we use migration validation to perform a full data compare and profile compare of the files at the vendors against the received datasets in the landing zone. The application isolates mismatches, missing records, metadata discrepancies, rounding errors, allows reconciliation of logic, and much more. The application ensures the data sets between two platforms, and any two platforms for that matter, be it a file against a database against another database, or an API against a BI report, or any combination of the sources that we see and that we will showcase in the demo shortly, can be compared directly. The suite provides an automated wizard to map datasets of any format against the other with automatic mapping, data type conversion, metadata conversion, thresholding, amongst a few features. The end user does not have to spend any time manually setting this up nor managing them overtly, and thus makes it very easy to have changes or additions into the system and makes validation a breeze. Next, we have data rules. Data rules play an important role throughout validating data in motion within a pipeline. The suite provides the users with a zero code or a no code system to define, parameterize, and run rules on multiple dimensions such as unicity, duplicity, completeness, validity, and more. The rules are also used to define business requirements and attribute validation. These rules are easily transferred between test cases and models. The application also provides a wizard to automate the deployment of data rules to hundreds of datasets at once. Next, ETL and logic validation. To ensure that the transformations and aggregations are accurate and to make sure that they do not leave unforeseen repercussions with consequent datasets and layers, we can apply white box and black box testing for transformations with replications of SQL, Python, VB and Scala code. Or we can use user-defined rules on the transformations or datasets directly. While preparing data from landing to curated, ensure that each transformation is giving the expected results by validating them either against the rules or the transformed datasets. With an AI assistant to help create these queries in code, the developer can easily offload the task of validating the transformation itself. Data observability is the next stage. Note that this tool can be applied as early as the ingestion layer. Here we apply a complete set of validations of the data before pushing it to reporting and analytics. This involves user-defined rules across all datasets, profiling the datasets and reports, and machine learning-based anomaly detection. Everything ranging from pattern alterations, volume shifts, distribution shifts, percentages of nulls, and much more is noted. And any anomalies found are notified to the end user. The suite ensures that the data leaving your system, be it in the form of files, views, or reports, gets validated against business rules, past profiles, and expected patterns. Finally, we have BI validation. This could be considered one of the most important aspects of any pipeline, as here the data is used to drive business decisions. It is crucial that the reports remain trustworthy through upgrades, deployments, and migrations. To achieve this, the application deploys automated tools for upgrade testing, regression testing, report to data testing, report to report testing, performance testing, security testing, and stress testing for multiple BI tools. To round out, each aspect of the test cases comes with automatic report generation, scheduling, notification systems, integration with test plans, CI/CD tools, and of course, plugin support. Before we move on to the practical demonstration of the product in the live demo, I'd like to spend a few minutes understanding the architecture. The first and foremost question, of course, being where exactly is the data going to be hosted and the application going to be hosted? Well, I'm happy to report that in most cases, our clients opt to install the application directly onto their infrastructure, and the product supports that. We do offer a bit of SaaS where we can host the product for you, but we understand that for most cases, data compliance and guidelines requires the product and the data to not leave the client's firewalls. And to this end, all components of the architecture, here you see all three will be installed directly onto your infrastructure behind your firewalls itself. With that out of the way, let's take a look and understand the three components in a bit more detail. Firstly, we have the Apache Tomcat server that orchestrates all the needed services. This includes your admin services, security services, reporting, and of course, connecting to the application and connecting to the end user as well. The second aspect is the engine. Now, this is the heart of the application as a whole, and we provide it in two particular slices. Firstly, we have an Apache Spark engine, which is built for ETL systems and primarily for high throughput, high volume requirements. This is based on a Spark session as it runs within one and can easily scale up on Kubernetes enabled clusters or can even work on a standalone on-premise cluster as well. All it needs at the end of the day is a Spark session. Once again, it's built for specific test cases where high volume and high throughput and multiple types of locations and sources and vendors are present. But to counter this, for ELT systems and for low throughput systems where more efficient solutions are needed, we have a database engine. In direct contrast with the Spark engine, the database engine runs within the corresponding database itself and uses the database's functions and temporary views to achieve all the data quality validation checkmarks that it has to achieve. An easy example for database engine usage is assuming you have an ELT system with all or at least most of the tables and views within the base Snowflake system itself. Now we understand that the task of even pulling tables or views out of Snowflake could be expensive in certain scenarios. So in this case, we would ask our users to use the database engine, which actually does not require the test cases or the data sets to be pulled out of Snowflake. The test cases can be directly run on the Snowflake engine itself. And thus database engine is pretty efficient usage in this particular fashion. Of course, it works very well for low throughput systems and is not as easily scalable as a Spark session would be. But once again, you don't have to choose either or for your system. You can choose one of the engines for specific use cases as well. Finally, the repository, which is by default PostgreSQL, but has Git integration built into the product. And this is where your base code of the application lies. This is where the test cases reside, and of course, the sample records and other tidbits of the product that you'll see. As a roundabout, we would like to iterate that the application can be installed directly onto your infrastructure itself. This is actually the norm for most of our clients. We understand that data compliance and guidelines imply that data never leave your system and your firewalls. And thus, our application has been molded to be directly agnostic of the cloud or on-prem nature of your system, and it can be installed directly onto your infrastructure, irrespective of what type of infrastructure that you're working with. For more details, you can of course have a better discussion on the exact deployment of the product as a whole. To round out, we do want to also define how exactly we can connect to the application. What we're going to showcase, of course, is the web browser version with the fancy UIs that is much more beginner friendly and user intuitive. But everything within the application is created with the developer first attitude, implying that every feature that you see, be it creation of test cases, changing parameters, running pipelines, creation of reports, creating integrations, and every other aspect that you see can be done via REST API commands as well as CLI commands. This adds the added aspect of easy integration within the product, as we will see in the demo as well, but ensures that if you want to do something in an automated fashion, or if you would like to do something from your developer console itself, you can do that easily using the product. With that, we wrap the architecture of the system. Now let's have a showcase of the live demo of the product. In this demo, we'll be showcasing the ETL validator and data quality monitor primarily. So first and foremost, welcome to DataOps Suite. What you see is the home page. For starters, we have the common tasks, a dashboard to view the past and current pipelines and test cases, and of course, the user log activity for your personal logs as well as the team's logs. The most important aspect here is the container. The container is our multi-tenant isolation system built to isolate projects or environments. Basically, it's there to ensure that if you want to segregate your projects based on roles, guidelines, or associations or permissions, you can do that by making sure that the admin provides the correct access roles to the correct users and then assign them to the appropriate containers. In this case, we have a bunch of curated demos that we've created specifically for this use case, and those are in the webinar container. So I'll be using that. Before anything else, let's get started with the first aspect, which is how do we connect to the various sources? Well, as you see, the application has a plethora of sources that it can connect to inherently. All of these sources are available to the user by default. These include a good amount of JDBC connections that you can define, flat files or complex files, be it on on-prem or cloud location, API connections for those pesky connections which do not really have a JDBC system involved and you would still like to pull datasets from them. You can of course use an API connection, and of course a BI connection. This is especially helpful when pulling reports and the datasets from the corresponding reports from Tableau and Power BI. Let's take a look on how exactly these connections are made. At the end of the day, a JDBC connection is a very simple connection that needs the credentials and the URL. This is the only thing for this for the suite as well. The application does come with an internal password vault out of the box, but can easily integrate and connect with your existing credential management services as well. In a similar vein, let's check out how do we connect to flat files or complex files. So here we'll pick up a CSV file and we'll assume that the CSV file is placed on S3. In this case, all we need is the corresponding credential and the path. In this case, it's the access keys and the secret access keys, and the bucket name is the path along with the location. In the same way, if you're working with, say, a complex file, assuming you're working with an XML file, all you have to do is define where this is kept. In this case, we can also define, let's go with an ADLS for now. And it's in a similar vein, all you have to do is define the container, the storage account, and the access keys, and you're good to go. Moving on the connections, if you want to define an API connection, while the application does provide a good number of defined authentications methods, you can also define your very own using plugins or code systems. You can also add a lot more options as seen in the screen. Finally, the connection to Power BI is pretty straightforward. Let's use Power BI as an example for BI tools. In this case, you have to define what type of application you'd like to work with. In this case, Power BI works with master users and service principals and the corresponding credentials and application ID. An application ID is basically an ID that Power BI can give to authenticate a third-party usage of the application. It's pretty straightforward to get, and we have a lot of documentation around the same as well. And the same lies for Tableau, where if you want to define a Tableau connection, all you need are corresponding steps. And if you want some additional SSO certifications or SSO validations to take place automatically as well, there are templates for web login commands that you can take from the support team itself. At the end of the day, it's a breeze for any end user to define a connection to the suite. Now that we've defined our sources, let's get into BI validation as a whole. There are a few sets of test cases that we have defined that tackle different business requirements that I've already created and opened beforehand. Let's tackle the very first one, which is that if you want to define your report as valid, you would like to use another report itself as a source of truth. This is pretty common in regression testing and upgrade testing. Here I've created a test case with regards to Tableau as my source. I'll quickly showcase the same in Power BI as well. The end user, first and foremost, is for regression. The first thing that you need to distinguish between regression and upgrade is that in regression, we are going to validate the report against its past version by creating a snapshot of it. And in upgrade, we are going to define two distinct reports and we're going to compare those two. The exact specifics will be revealed as you move along in the demo. So the end user is first prompted to define what connection they would like to use. Here I've already created a Tableau connection. I'll be using that. And then is prompted to define which exact reports they would like to work with. Here we see we already have a report pre-selected, but of course I can go into the workspace and choose the specific report that my user that I use, whose credentials I've used, has access to. Then the user is prompted to actually create a benchmark of the report. A benchmark is basically a snapshot that keeps track of all the filters, the report, the corresponding data sets, and other aspects that were seen in this corresponding report. This is the source of truth against which all the newer versions of the reports will be compared against. And of course, you can schedule the creation of benchmark as well. Then in the results, we see that in this particular use case, the benchmark has failed. Here you have two options as an end user. You can either look at the text as we see. That allow me to zoom in a little so that we can actually see the exact problems in the report. So here we see that yes, there are a few textual differences that were not quite visible from a zoomed out version, but the application also gives you a pixel to pixel comparison in terms of appearance. So here you'll see that in cases of differences where places such as the entire graph has been shifted, as we see as with the blue box that's highlighted, the entire graphic, the visual itself has actually been shifted by a few pixels, and the application catches that along with color differences and the other aspects as well that you might notice. So in this case, you can either do a proper text to text comparison between the reports and its previous version, or you can choose to do a pixel to pixel comparison against the entire report. In the upcoming releases, we also have the feature set where you can define what exact threshold you would like to define for comparisons. And if you'd like to run this comparison only on a specific section of a report, so I could define this report running only on the top left section or just the top section as well, which is upcoming in the new releases. So this was a Tableau thing, and let us go back to the previous run. Of course, everything comes with the previous runs, and here I want to showcase Power BI in the same way. So here I have a Power BI upgrade test plan and regression test plan. The regression test plan works in the same fashion where you have two distinct reports, and in the results we see that yes, corresponding differences have been highlighted specifically, as we can see here. So here we see that a bookmark was changed, the corresponding visual was changed, but data was not, and that was caught as well, along with the change in the corresponding positioning of that system as well. And as you see, the filters was moved from a middle alignment to a bottom alignment, and that is something that has been caught by the application as well. Of course, the other thing that we would like to showcase is the upgrade test plan. In the upgrade test plan, the main difference here is that report A and report B are two different reports. These are not the same reports with different versions. These are actually picked in from specific containers itself, from specific different source and target locations. And as you see, there's a different path for each of the corresponding report. And the main reason for me to actually showcase this in my runs is to illustrate that if you have such a run where you have run the specific test cases, each and every test case has its own associated reports that is automatically generated. This reports can be further customized by adding your own specific widgets and defined with regards to summaries and upgrades. And these reports can also contain specific snapshots of the specific text that you're working with. So here you see that this is an entire snapshot of the differences, and this can be either be downloaded by the end user or can be sent across using plugins and other notification channels that the application comes with. The application also has scheduling capabilities built in. So if you'd like to schedule your test plans with regards to either based on a trigger of an existing test plan or CI/CD tool, you can do that, or you can use our base scheduler to define when exactly you would like to run this test cases as well. So that's the first aspect of our use case. We want to ensure that our reports are being validated against other reports. Here we have defined a pixel to pixel comparison. We have defined a test plan comparison. We can run multiple test plans all together. Here you see we have just compared one report, but if the end user wants to run multiple test plans, in our upcoming release, we have created a provision that all you have to do is drag and drop the workspace, and the corresponding entire set of reports will be built in, and the corresponding regression and upgrade test plan will work according to all the reports present. And so you won't even have to create existing test plans for each report. But if you'd like to segregate them, perform some more specifications, you can always use pipelines to define these reports as well. In pipelines, you can actually combine multiple test cases and define conditional clauses, parallel sequencing, and of course, define special thresholds and connect them to your existing tool sets as well. The application does have existing connections to test plans such as Azure test plans, and is already present on the AWS and Azure marketplace as well, and easily integrates with the existing plans on those platforms. But if you're working with a CI/CD tool such as Jenkins and you'd like to use that to define this corresponding TQM test plan, you can actually do that easily as well by defining the connection using the REST APIs of this particular pipeline. So that is the very first aspect, which is a report to report comparison. Now let's move on to the other aspect, which is now that you validated your report against other reports, let's see if you can validate your reports against a data set as well. So for this, I'm going to use this particular example with the particular set business use case. So here you see that this is a particular Power BI report that I picked up, and each of the visuals that are present have a corresponding data set. If I can quickly go back to reports, and this will basically reload the entire report for me once again by logging into Power BI from the server side using the credentials I provided. You see there are about 4 or 5 visuals within my system, and there are of course filters present as well. What I can do is I can pick up the specific filter data sets right there. I can choose which of these I want to create against a data set. Now, a quick disclaimer here. There are filters present right here, and I can actually parameterize these filters using my data flow parameters, which are global and local and scale. So if I want to have a specific use case where I want to validate whether this particular data set that I see, sum of yearly income by total children, is it valid for, say, a specific sub-demographic? In this case, if the demographic is based on gender, if I want to apply a set of gender values there and I want to validate this particular report against that, I can do that as well. That's one of the use cases, and we have a set of case studies dedicated to this specific use case as well. In this, of course, we are going to go for the much more simpler use case where we have not defined any parameters as such. And here we have just picked up the raw data set as is after the set filters were applied. And this is the data set and how it looks. And the results also keeps tracks with a snapshot to help the user understand what exact set of filters or data sets were being picked up from in this particular use case. So that's the first aspect picked up. We picked up our visual and we've converted the visual into a data set that we can use. Now let's go to the other part of the problem statement. Here we need to ensure that this particular visual is validated against the data set. So first we need to pull in the data set. As you see, I can define my connection to SQL Server and any of those connections that I saw earlier. It could be an Excel file, a CSV file, or anything specific. I can directly define my connection to that, and of course use either JDBC connections or SQL connection or other connections to pull in those specific data sets. Here I've pulled in the entire DIM customer table, but of course, before I validate it against the report, I need to aggregate it. Here the application can use an OpenAI assistant such as ChatGPT to actually create the query. The application is capable of sending the corresponding system context so as to better understand how exactly the data sets correlate with each other to work with. And of course, if you want to avoid that, you can use a query builder as well, create parameterized reports for the same. In this particular fashion, I've created an aggregate. And now I run the aggregates against each other, and here I see there's one mismatch. Most of the records have been matched, and this is one mismatch. And here I see the 2 children have been, the total children 2, I see a mismatch of about 10% or so. If there were records present in only one and not the other, those would be caught in only and only in B. And if there are any duplicates, even those would be caught with by the application. Now let's take a move ahead. If you understand that this is a set of mismatched records, I want to ensure that I can work with this mismatched records. I want to do a bunch of things. Maybe I want to download this report. I can of course download the entire set of records that are present in this case as well. But maybe I want to automatically generate a Jira ticket. For that, we have plugins within our system. Plugins are user-defined code variables that you can create that the end user only sees an options to. So here you see only options are visible to me. But if I just quickly go back to a different use case, and if I go to admin, you'll see that these plugins are actually code systems that the end user can define themselves with parameters and the input data sets that are used in the code. So basically, the end user only has to use defined parameters and the codes, and the tech-savvy user can actually create this. The non-tech-savvy user only has to define them as the end parameters, and these are the parameters that you see at the end of the day. So if I go back to my use case real quick, and if I search the Jira, you'll see that in the parameters, these are the parameters that the end user sees, and the end user does not see the code, and they don't have to worry about the exact code. All they have to worry about is the exact data set and the credentials to the Jira ticket, Jira platform they would like to work with, and the plugin takes care of the rest. In this particular fashion, if there are certain features or certain uh, use cases which are specific to your specific niche, you can easily deploy them to multiple data sets at once, and you don't have to maintain multiple versions of that. You can define just one specific version and maintain it from a single location. Of course, you can also use this data set in other use cases as well. So say I want to send this as an email, or want to apply some reconciliation on top of it. I can pick up this data set using my SQL or Python code, and differences is the data set I was working with. So the corresponding output that you see, this is not just a sample record. This is an actual full-fledged data set. So if I want to work with just the matched records, these 5 records are actually a data set that I can work with either in SQL, Python, Scala, or other code sets. Of course, in this case, our problem statement is pretty simple. We basically just wanted to ensure if our reports are matching, and here we see that no, there's a bit of mismatch, and so our reports are actually slightly incorrect. Now let's move on to the next business use case, which is with regards to applying rules to our system. So you have your corresponding report. So in this case, I have a Power BI report with a bunch of data sets. It's a very similar one to what we saw earlier. But here, I don't want to validate my data report against data set or another report. I want to validate it against rules. These are my corresponding data sets, and I want to apply a bunch of rules on top of it. So what type of rules am I discussing? Well, the user's imagination is what's the actual limit here, as the user is prompted to use the zero code, low code system to define anything from metadata validations to business requirement validations. And I've done the same with the following examples. Here I've actually defined a domain rule check to ensure that the market column, which has market values in it, is present in the domain that I've defined as market. I can use different domains present here as well, and this will be very apt when I showcase the results. That what it basically does is that it ensures that the values seen in the corresponding column are confined to an expected list of values. It'll be much more clearer once I showcase this in the results. In other use cases, I've basically used a few aggregations and attribute rules. Attribute rules are very powerful as they take into account the data type of the column you're working with and change the corresponding parameters or operators accordingly. So here, since I'm working with an integer, greater than, less than, others come into picture. But if I was working with a string, or say a character string, in that particular case, contains regular expressions and other sort of operators would come into the mix. The cherry on top here is that these set of operators can be created by the end user as well. Quickly going back to the admin, you as an end user can define your very own operators and your own specific use cases as well. Of course, here what I've used it to is ensure that my sales are never negative and also that my sales are never null. Of course, I can define filter conditions for the same. I've applied a similar set of rules on a different use case, and here I've applied a metric compare and a duplicacy check. Duplicacy check is pretty self-explained. You want to ensure that your reports do not contain duplicates across certain columns, so you can define them right here as well. Everything can be done within a few clicks. And what I've also done is I've defined a metric rule check. A metric rule check is very powerful as it allows the user to validate a report not just on a record-to-record level, but at an aggregate level. Easy example here would be that you want to ensure that your maximum value or your minimum value is within certain thresholds. And we would like to validate it against another threshold as well, as I've done here. The business requirement here was that I have 2 distinct graphs, if you've noticed. Both of them have the total sales, but they are distinguished based on ship mode and by market. I would like to ensure that the total sum across both the graphs actually adds up to be the same figure, because at the end of the day, these are the same sales, it's just being distinguished across different dimensions. And so what I've done is I've basically picked up the sum of the sales and I've used Query Builder to get this particular query. And here I see that both of my test cases have failed. Here I see that yes, my sales is actually incorrect based on the metric value and compare value. There's a bit of, I would say, about a 10% difference. So that's alarming for my report. And my other test case has also failed. But in this case, the test case has failed in market domain. If you remember, this is to ensure that my corresponding market values are in the specific domain. And here we see that the expected value is APAC, not Asia Pacific. And this is one of the most common issues that we see in reports, that there might be certain value sets that are not expected that pop up because of name aliases and other aspects. So your application can catch that as well. And of course, everything is isolated. So if you want to pick up this data set as well, either download them or work with them, you can do that. To finish up data rules, all the rules here are parameterizable and easily exportable. There's a wizard that the application comes with, similar to the wizard that we were speaking of earlier for creation of test cases for multiple reports. You can actually deploy multiple rule sets to the same set of reports or the same set of rules to multiple set of reports using the existing wizard as well. And of course, if you would like to get into, you can work with the exported JSON file that the rule comes into, tag it yourself, and then create the script to upload these rules specifically yourself as well. The application is pretty open-ended and developer friendly. Finally, well, now that we have wrapped up the validation of our reports with regards to another report, with regards to a data set, with regards to rules, let's make sure we can also apply observability to the mix. So what we have done here is quite simple. I've taken up a report, and in this case, this is a Tableau report with a set of filters applied. And in this case, we see a bar graph and a line graph. The bar graph represents total number of sales for different ship modes across different departments. And the line graph actually represents something on the similar lines, but except it's order quantities across different ship modes. Now, what I'd like to ensure is I would like to define profiling and observability on the scene. What I mean by profiling, and this is done for the bar graph, is to ensure that the aggregates and patterns of my application match. So here I'm keeping track of row count, the volumes, I'm keeping track of the minimum maximum lengths, the distribution, the distinct counts, the null counts, the mean and other such aggregates of the measure, and of course the frequency and the pattern analysis as well. And the best way to illustrate this is with the results. In the results, I see that the application was keeping track of this over the course of multiple runs, and it has found that sales is an anomaly. And sales is an anomaly particularly in the metric of mean, because based on the previous runs, the mean should not have been this high. It actually normalized the expected range based on the past runs, and now has got that the mean has drastically increased. And so we found out that, okay, something is up with my report. The same thing can be applied on the other set of aggregates that we see here, as well as the patterns. This is very important when you're working with date types or textual patterns or license fees or any kind of primary key where a set pattern is expected. Easy example here would be license plates, where you expect a set number of patterns, and if something is off that pattern, the application can catch that as well. And of course, frequency analysis is just a distribution that you see. In most cases, you expect a certain amount of distribution, but if the distribution changes, you can either apply direct rules on top of this profile or let the profile itself figure out that, hey, there's been an anomaly detected, similar to what we just showcased. The final thing is, of course, with regards to observability right here. And in here, we give the end user full access to the exact way they would want to identify anomalies. Going back to our Tableau report, we see that here we have a very irregular line that actually keeps track of the order quantity across multiple days. This order quantity is, of course, dependent on seasonalities, the exact date, time of the corresponding system that's going on, and of course any sales seasons, boost, and other aspects. So there are multiple variables across which this particular metric is dependent, but we do have ways to identify anomalies in this case as well. We use machine learning code where we'll ask our end users to define across which categories we want to distinguish our metric anomaly system, across what measures we want to measure them, and of course if there's a date that works with it. This is not a compulsory column. Here we have a sales date, so we're using that. If we do not provide this, each and every run is counted as an exceptional sale date. The user is prompted to define a specific type of prediction they would like to work with. And finally, in the results, we see that we can actually catch specifics being caught up here. So here we can actually go to, say, this particular error, and we see that this particular ship mode for regular air has actually failed. And once I zoom out, we'll actually see that yes, the application was indeed trying to capture the bounds, upper and lower bounds of this metric based on the past data sets and based on other variables that we have defined. And here we have found an anomaly within the system, a metric that is much more higher than expected. In this particular fashion, we have actually applied observability on our reports as well. So making sure we cover all four corners of validation within our system. So in this particular fashion, what we've basically done is we have validated our reports across multiple dimensions. There's of course other aspects to validation as well, which are upcoming and already present within the system with regards to performance test plans, security test plans, and of course validating the test plan with regards to catalogs and other aspects which are upcoming as feature sets, and of course things that I could not showcase due to time constraints. But once again, this is just a tip of the iceberg, that is the BI validation. For more questions and further details, feel free to comment or ask us more questions. And of course, you can feel free to get in touch with us for a curated demo specific catered to your specific use cases as well. Thanks a lot.